across the white dress like blood on snow. Victoria Hartwell smiled, a sharp, cruel smile of satisfaction, as the young server frantically tried to wipe the stain away. "Oh, how unfortunate," Victoria said softly, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "Some people just don't seem to understand how to behave in elegant places." The annual Boston Charity Gala gathered the East Coast elite under chandeliers glittering with Austrian crystals. Every table was covered in orchids, every guest perfectly polished. It was an evening of grace and hidden arrogance. Jasmine Washington, only 24, had taken the extra waitressing job to cover her last semester at Harvard Business School. Her hair was neatly tied in a bun, her posture calm, her movements graceful. She carried herself like someone who'd learned composure through hardship. Victoria, meanwhile, was the kind of woman who saw charity events as personal runways. The glamorous wife of real estate tycoon Robert Hartwell, rich by birth and richer by marriage. Her life revolved around luxury boutiques and designer spa appointments. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Jasmine said quietly, bending down to pick up the broken glass. "I'll take care of it right away." "Don't worry," Victoria replied loudly, ensuring the surrounding tables could hear. "Accidents happen when certain people are hired for special events." The laughter from nearby guests was soft but sharp. Some looked away in discomfort. Others watched with interest. "Perhaps next time," Victoria continued with exaggerated politeness, "the organizers should hire staff who understand refined manners." But Jasmine remained calm, her voice steady, her expression serene. "Of course, ma'am. Everything will be handled properly." Victoria frowned. The young woman's composure irritated her. She wanted to see fear, not grace. As Jasmine turned toward the kitchen, she passed the main table where a silver-haired man sat, observing in silence. Their eyes met for only a second. He gave the smallest nod, subtle yet meaningful. Robert Hartwell, the man who'd built an empire by watching others when they thought no one was watching, saw two things that night: the cruel vanity of his wife and the quiet strength of the woman she had tried to humiliate. Inside the kitchen, Jasmine finally let her hands tremble for a moment. 20 minutes earlier, she'd simply been a student earning a paycheck. Now something deeper stirred within her, a determination that this night would not end as it began. None of the guests sipping champagne could have guessed that the young waitress they looked down on would soon turn this humiliation into something unforgettable, a turning point that would expose every mask in that glittering room. "Did you see that?" Victoria exclaimed, waving her manicured hand with theatrical outrage. "The nerve of some people, thinking they can just waltz into our events. Clearly someone didn't screen the staff properly." Margaret Wellington, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune, nodded eagerly. "Darling, you're absolutely right. Just yesterday, I had to let a maid go because she questioned my cleaning methods. People really need to understand their place." As Jasmine returned to the main hall, she could feel the weight of their stares. The group around Victoria had grown, and their whispers sliced through the air like tiny blades. "Of course she came back," one of them muttered. "She probably needs this job desperately." "Imagine if one of our daughters had to do something like this." "At least she knows her place," another added, smirking. Victoria, sensing her audience's attention, lifted her chin and spoke louder. "Well, ladies, we shouldn't be too harsh," she said mockingly. "Not everyone is lucky enough to be born with a silver spoon or receive a proper education." Sonna. What Victoria didn't know was that Jasmine had graduated summa cum laude in economics from the University of Chicago before earning her place at Harvard, that she had grown up helping her mother, a night shift cleaner raising 3 children alone, by translating legal documents and managing the family's modest finances. By 16, Jasmine had already built a small savings fund that later paid for her brother's college tuition. Jasmine continued her work in silence, but Margaret decided to twist the knife. "Dear," she called out sweetly, her tone dripping with condescension, "you do understand that staff should remain discreet during such events? It's best not to attract attention." "Yes, ma'am," Jasmine replied evenly, meeting her gaze with calm confidence. Something in her poise made Margaret hesitate. There was intellect, dignity, in Jasmine's eyes that didn't fit the stereotype she expected. Victoria noticed the hesitation and decided to push further. Margaret's absolutely right, she said, standing up with a cruel smile. Perhaps we should go over a few basic rules of etiquette. You can read, can't you? The words hung in the air like poison. Conversations around them died instantly. Every eye in the hall turned toward Jasmine. Yes, ma'am, Jasmine said softly but firmly. I can read perfectly well. Victoria laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Wonderful. Then maybe you can read this for us. She snatched up a menu and thrust it toward Jasmine. Let's make sure the staff truly understands what's being served to our distinguished guests. It was a deliberate trap, a public humiliation designed to make Jasmine stumble over the French words, to give Victoria a reason to call security or simply revel in superiority. At the head table, Robert Hartwell's jaw tightened. In 23 years of marriage, he had seen his wife's vanity many times, but never cruelty this raw. Jasmine accepted the menu without flinching. She looked straight at Victoria, a faint smile curving her lips. With pleasure, ma'am, she said. Then to everyone's astonishment, she began to read. Fluently, elegantly, and with a flawless French accent she had mastered during a 2-year academic exchange program in Lyon. Amuse-bouche de glace à la truffe noire, suivi d'un potage printanier parfumé aux herbes fanes. Her voice was smooth and confident, each word rolling off her tongue like music. Guests turned their heads. Even the string quartet seemed to fade as she spoke. By the time she finished, Et pour terminer, le grand marnier accompagné d'une vanille de Madagascar. The room had fallen completely silent. Jasmine handed the menu back with a polite smile. I hope that was helpful, ma'am. Victoria stood frozen, color draining from her face. Margaret stared, speechless. The entire circle of guests exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the woman they'd mocked had just reminded them what true grace looks like. It was impossible to ignore the truth. This simple waitress carried herself with an intelligence and grace that outshone nearly everyone in the room. From the head table, Robert Hartwell rose. His every step toward the group drew curious glances. When his eyes met Jasmine's, she didn't see pity there. She saw respect and something dangerously close to admiration. Victoria, he said softly, his voice low but firm, the tone she instantly recognized as a warning. Perhaps it's time we focus on the real purpose of this evening, charity. Victoria blinked, realizing that she'd lost control of the moment. Of course, dear, she replied with an artificial smile. Just trying to ensure everyone understood the proper protocols. Jasmine inclined her head politely and stepped away, her composure flawless. But as she did, Margaret leaned close to whisper, Darling, perhaps we misjudged her. Victoria's smile vanished. Her fingers tightened on Margaret's arm. We didn't misjudge anything, she hissed. Academic tricks don't change who she really is, and before the night is over, I'll make sure everyone here knows it. What Victoria could never have imagined was that Jasmine had spent the last 4 years documenting workplace discrimination for her MBA thesis, that she knew civil rights law by heart and was carrying a discreet recording device that had captured every cruel word. While Victoria plotted her next act of humiliation, Jasmine moved through the glittering hall with quiet confidence, holding the kind of secret that didn't need to be spoken, only revealed at the perfect time. She'd learned long ago that true strength doesn't shout, it observes, it records, and when the moment is right, it strikes with undeniable truth. At the main table, Robert sat down again, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something magnetic about the young woman his wife had tried to destroy, a poise and intellect that no uniform could hide. None of the guests sipping champagne realized that this waitress was only weeks away from becoming the youngest senior analyst at one of the country's top consulting firms. Or that every arrogant word spoken tonight would soon become evidence in a reckoning no one in that ballroom would forget. Later, in the quiet of the hotel's marble bathroom, Jasmine finally let her hands tremble. Not from fear, from focused adrenaline. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny digital recorder. The screen blinked. Recording complete. 23 minutes of crystal clear audio. Insults, mockery, and open discrimination. For her Harvard MBA thesis on racial bias in elite corporate culture, it was valuable material. But as she stared at her reflection in the gilded mirror, Jasmine realized this was no longer just research. It was personal. A soft knock broke the silence. "Miss Washington, are you all right?" She recognized the voice. Calm, deep, sincere. Robert Hartwell. For a moment she hesitated, then opened the door. Robert stood there alone, his hands clasped nervously, guilt written across his face. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "There's no excuse for what happened tonight. None." Jasmine studied him carefully. She had met many men like him. Powerful, polite, quick to sympathize but slow to act. Yet in Robert's eyes she saw something different. Not pity, remorse, and anger. Not at her, but at himself. "Mr. Hartwell," she replied gently, "you don't need to take responsibility for your wife's choices." "On the contrary," he said firmly, "after 23 years of marriage, I've had countless chances to correct this kind of behavior, and I failed every time." He hesitated, then added, "May I ask you something directly?" Jasmine nodded. "You're not really a waitress, are you?" For the first time that evening, Jasmine allowed herself to smile. "What makes you say that?" "Your French is better than half the professors I know," Robert said. "Your posture, your articulation, your restraint under attack, and your intelligence. It's impossible to miss." "I'm an MBA student at Harvard," Jasmine admitted at last. "I work part-time to support my family and finish my degree." Robert closed his eyes, shaken. "Harvard? My God. Jasmine, my wife just humiliated a Harvard student for no reason other than prejudice." "Mr. Hartwell," Jasmine said quietly, "this kind of thing happens more often than most people want to believe. Your wife just said aloud what many only think in silence." For Jasmine, the night's humiliation had become something far greater, a catalyst for real change. What had begun as an insult was transforming into an opportunity to rewrite the very systems that allowed people like Victoria to thrive unchecked. As she adjusted her uniform and prepared to return to the dining room, Jasmine felt an almost electric clarity. The words, the sneers, the arrogance, they would no longer be weapons used against her. They would be evidence. Victoria had no idea that the woman she tried to humiliate wasn't just a waitress. She was a future consultant who would soon have direct access to her husband's company's corporate systems. Jasmine understood that revenge wasn't about loud gestures. True justice was built through quiet, meticulous work that led to lasting change. Looking at her reflection one last time, Jasmine smiled faintly. This was no longer just the end of a bad night. It was the beginning of a transformation. Victoria had tried to put her in her place, unaware that she had actually launched her toward a position of power. The waitress was about to become the consultant, and when that happened, it would be Victoria who learned what her real place was, in a world where character mattered more than privilege. 3 weeks later, Victoria Hartwell woke up uneasy. Her phone flashed with 47 missed calls and hundreds of unread messages. The first link she opened made her blood run cold. Business executive caught in discrimination scandal. Viral audio exposes Boston's elite. There it was, her own photo from the gala, captured mid-sneer. The headline blazed across every news feed. The 23-minute audio of her cruel words was now playing on every major station in the city. Each sentence she had uttered against Jasmine echoed crystal clear, dissected by radio hosts, condemned by public figures, and discussed by millions. She stumbled downstairs, phone shaking in her hand, and found Robert sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, calm, distant, unreadable. "Robert," she gasped, "you have to do something. This is an attack. That waitress is trying to destroy us." Robert didn't look up. "Victoria," he said evenly, "that waitress is now our company's new corporate diversity consultant. After hearing the recording, I understand exactly why we need her." Victoria froze. "What? What did you just say?" "She started yesterday," Robert continued. "Her first project is a full cultural audit, including every executive and leadership position. I'm sure you understand what that means." Before she could respond, her phone rang again. "Victoria?" said a crisp voice on the other end. It was Patricia Whitmore, chairwoman of the exclusive tennis club Victoria had belonged to for 15 years. "The board met this morning. Your membership has been revoked, effective immediately. The behavior in that recording is incompatible with our values." The call ended abruptly. Moments later, Victoria's phone exploded with notifications. Her social group chat, Ladies Who Lunch, was filled with messages. "I can't believe we socialized with her for years. My daughter goes to Harvard. How many Jasmines has she insulted without us knowing? James says he won't do business with Hartwell Development anymore." Her Instagram showed thousands of followers disappearing overnight. The comments under her most recent post were merciless. "Unbelievable behavior. Power without empathy is poison. I hope she finally learned something," Margaret called, her voice trembling. "Victoria, Charles canceled the renovation contract. He doesn't want to be associated with us anymore. I think we're finished socially." By now, Victoria was hyperventilating. "Robert, you have to fix this. Make the audio disappear. File a lawsuit. Do something." Robert slowly set down his coffee and looked her in the eye. "Victoria," he said quietly, "you recorded that audio. Every word came from your own mouth. There's no one to sue, except yourself." The phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Harrison, director of the charitable foundation, where Victoria had served as vice president for 8 years. "Victoria," his tone was icy, "the board has voted unanimously to remove you from all positions, effective immediately." Discovering that one of our leaders spoke that way was deeply disturbing. "We expect you to return your foundation credentials by tomorrow." The call ended. Victoria sank into her chair, her perfect world collapsing around her. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her social circle, her influence, her charities, her contracts, and the respect of the community she once looked down upon. Robert folded his newspaper and glanced at her one last time. "You know what the most ironic part is?" he said quietly. He didn't need to finish. Victoria already knew. The woman she had mocked had become the embodiment of everything she had pretended to be: intelligent, dignified, and truly powerful. "Jasmine didn't even have to lift a finger," Robert said coldly. "She simply documented your true nature and let your own words destroy you." At that exact moment, Jasmine Washington was walking through the glass doors of Hartwell Development, wearing an elegant navy suit and carrying a briefcase filled with proposals for cultural reform. In less than a month, she had gone from a humiliated waitress to a respected corporate consultant. "Starting today," Robert announced to the staff meeting, "Miss Jasmine Washington will lead our new diversity and inclusion initiative. She has full authority to make whatever changes are necessary to strengthen our company culture." Applause followed. Some employees looked at her with quiet admiration. Most already knew who she was and what had happened. Jasmine smiled with calm confidence. "My goal isn't punishment," she began. "It's progress. I want to help build a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected, no matter where they come from or what they look like." Meanwhile, Victoria was trapped in her mansion, watching her reputation crumble in real time. Every notification was another door closing, cancellations, withdrawn invitations, silent friends. Margaret stopped answering her calls. Patricia Whitmore, head of the tennis club, posted a smiling group photo with the caption, "Celebrating our shared values of respect and inclusion." Even her longtime hairdresser claimed to be fully booked. That night, Robert found Victoria sitting at her vanity, makeup streaked with tears. 23 years, he said quietly. 23 years I lived beside this person and pretended not to see who she really was. "Robert, please," she begged. "It was a misunderstanding." "No," he replied. "It was you, exactly as you've always been. The only difference is that this time, someone pressed record." He began packing his clothes into a suitcase. "My lawyers will bring the divorce papers tomorrow. You can keep the house. Everything else will be divided by the court." Victoria stood, desperate. "You can't do this. Not over a waitress." Robert stopped and looked at her. "Over a Harvard student you tried to humiliate out of pure prejudice. Over 23 years of cruelty I can't unsee. Over realizing my wife is the kind of person I've spent my life fighting against." For the first time, Victoria understood the full weight of her downfall. Not just the end of a marriage, but the collapse of an identity built entirely on privilege and illusion. The next morning, sunlight poured through Jasmine's small apartment near Harvard. She packed her laptop, reviewing messages of encouragement from professors, colleagues, and complete strangers who had followed her story. What had started as a night of part-time work had turned into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring real, lasting change. Not through revenge, but through transformation. While Victoria hid from the world, Jasmine walked confidently into a future built on dignity, integrity, and strength. The woman who had once been put in her place was now redefining what power truly meant. 6 months later, Jasmine stood on the top floor of the Hartwell Development headquarters, now promoted to Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Her new policies became a national model for fairness in the workplace, and her independent consulting firm flourished, guiding other companies toward genuine reform. As for Victoria, she lived alone in her vast empty mansion, divorced, isolated, unwelcome in every circle she once ruled. Her online apologies were met with silence or sharp reminders of the pain she'd caused. Every attempt to rebuild her image failed. Robert, meanwhile, remarried to a civil rights attorney and donated half of his fortune to scholarships for underprivileged students. At the Harvard graduation ceremony, Jasmine addressed hundreds of students. Never let anyone define your worth through prejudice. The best revenge is success they never believed you could achieve. The recording that had once been used to hurt her was now played in classrooms across the country, a case study on the consequences of arrogance and bias. Jasmine had turned humiliation into purpose, pain into power, and a single cruel moment into a legacy that would inspire generations.